Okay, so we might get things underway in the interest of time. Um, Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tyson Bowen. I'm the Director of Media and Government Relations at the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. For the next hour, we're just going to take you through a bit of a crash course in the basics of marketing communications, a couple of tips along the way. This is a bit of a menu and a taster, so if there are things that you have any questions about along the way, please place them into the chat box, and we'll get to those questions at the end. But for the moment, please take the next hour to relax, soak up everything, and hit me up with questions at the end. What we will be covering today is a brief introduction to AMGC, an overview of the marketing mix, dive in very quickly to public relations, advertising, and marketing or branding and the differences between them. Look at where you could start in addressing any of your marketing communications needs, a few tips and a couple of case studies, an overview of what constitutes news, a quick look at some social media tips, and then we'll cover off some Q&A. A little bit about AMGC, just as a refresher for those that are first timers or new to the organisation. AMGC, or the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, is an industry-led organisation focusing in on small to medium-sized manufacturers. We are the key voice for this industry. We currently have a membership base of 4,500 members across the nation, and we advocate for manufacturing at all levels across the state, federal and territory governments. Our activities include 4 key pillars of direction, demonstration, impact, and awareness. On the direction side, it's all insight driven, and that is to provide recommendations on how to grow the industry and its impact locally. We then put those recommendations into action through demonstration, and in previous and current programs, that's through co-funded initiatives. Impact is looking at evaluating those actions that we've taken and evaluating their success. And awareness is about communicating those outcomes and benefits, which is where I spend a lot of focusing on my time. In short, AMGC is committed to transforming Australia from the lucky country to the smart country by leveraging our manufacturing industry and capability. Over our history of 8 years, we've had a track record of delivering successful media and communications campaigns for our members, the industry at large, and the government organisations that we've partnered with over the time. Our expertise is paired with a deep understanding of manufacturing, and we use that understanding and those contacts to cut through the clutter to really deliver impactful communication campaigns, some examples of which you can see on the screen. Our industry and media network extends beyond the normal trade press, and it reaches into broadcast and print media and online channels. And a lot of that is about raising awareness with those that are latent and don't really have an understanding or an awareness of what's going on in manufacturing. Industry and trade press very much talks to people that largely understand the good work you're doing. We undertake business launches, policy announcements, product introductions, events, and we have been able to place manufacturing at the top of the agenda, both in Australia and abroad. We have strong links to federal, state and territory governments, which means we can gain access to policy makers and the decision makers. And where we have provided support, it can be tailored to be as light touch or as integrated into your business or to serve the requirements that you need for your business. A little bit about me. I've been working in the field of communications now for 19 years. I started out my career with a background in engineering and then moved into comms because that was where my expertise suited best. Experience in crisis, consumer and shareholder communications, media relations, franchisee and dealer communications, internal, corporate comms and government relations. And sounds like a lot, but it'll all start to make sense when we go through the detail. I actually really enjoy building awareness and corporate reputations. That's something I'm really passionate about. If there's one thing that I can instill in everybody today, it's that you only get one chance to make a first impression. And comms in all its forms is a really important pillar of that. If you were to have a meeting with a potential client, you would pull out all stops. But when you're approaching media or other communications activities, some people tend to try and shortcut it. And I think it's missing an opportunity. And we'll get into that why, into how that may be shortly. But just remember, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So leveraging the marketing mix in building your company's communications and its profile is important. And there are many pillars and tenets to that. Public and media relations is one, marketing, branding, social media, traditional media, which is print and broadcast, direct mail and CRM events, and outreach or engagement are all components of having an integrated marketing plan. You don't need to have all of them, but they need to be considered in a bigger picture when you're looking at how to grow your business and bring the brand and all of your comms along with it. One thing is that it needs to be consistent between all of those elements. Otherwise, you end up with conflicting or confusing messages, or even conflicting or confusing visuals out in the market. To make this a little bit simpler to understand, you can really break all of these elements down into three. And you'll see this color coding come up more and more as we sort of move through the presentation. But events or outreach and engagement, public and media relations all sort of tend to sit under that PR banner. Marketing and branding is self-explanatory. It's the marketing efforts you take and the branding that your business represents. And then you've got these areas in yellow, which sort of cover off advertising. But all of them need to complement each other, and they need to lean in on the different facets and capabilities of each function. How would that look? Good old Venn diagrams. So in this instance, they're interconnected and complementary. So public relations and advertising can work in concert to deliver messaging and engagement, public relations and marketing to deliver content, or advertising and marketing for creative, which then also leads into, influencing what you do in public relations. So while PR builds relationships and awareness, advertising has a tendency to drive sales, and brand management shapes perceptions. It's all essential in a cohesive marketing strategy. In essence, branding lays the foundation for how a brand is perceived. Advertising promotes your products or your services or your business, and PR manages your public perceptions and relationships or influences external parties. Together, they create that comprehensive marketing strategy. So public relations and media relations, it's very much an earned media function. Everything that you see in the world of public relations is about relationships and leaning on third parties and working with third parties to tell your story. You don't pay for the space that your message or your activities appear in. And this is why it's called earned media, because you have to go out and earn it. PR and these efforts are an influenced message. So PR cannot control the message that's delivered. You work to, I suppose, craft the message, but then you rely on a third party, and it might be a journalist or an outlet, to convey that message. So sometimes it's a little bit different to what you may want to see, but if you're good at what you do and you have a clear brand, then generally it will complement everything you do. PR is a long-term focus. It's very hard to have a PR function that you turn on and off, because relationships with those media and journalists need to be continued over time to build familiarity and an understanding of what your brand, or in our case, industry, represents. PR and media is about storytelling. You pick up the newspaper, you want to read something that's engaging. You jump online, you want to see something, a story that's different, something that's new, and it's in the name, news. It's new, it's novel, and it's interesting. So you really need to lean in on the art of storytelling. And I think too often some manufacturers discount the stories they've got to tell, and those little nuggets of gold that are really interesting to people if you just have the opportunity to expose an audience to it. In PR, that audience is broad. So you are appearing in a newspaper that can go everywhere. You are on the web, which can go everywhere. But it is about general awareness. It's about building exposure. It is also about building familiarity with your company. It can also cross borders, both within Australia, but also go internationally. And we'll cover this a little bit later on in a case study. As I said, public relations is an earned media. And so there are a number of different instances where this function leans in on everything from media, but also government relations, to lobbying, community relations. So if you're undertaking a new build or a project that you're involved in, it might be major infrastructure, then bringing the community on that journey is an important thing. If you're seeking to gain investors or do a capital raise, then you can lean in on PR to build the company profile and tell your story. Similarly, and hopefully not very often, if you have a problem, crisis comms is about managing the message and making sure that people understand the true story and that they're not just filling pages with assumed stories or problems. There are a couple of instances where the lines between PR and advertising blur, but as a general rule, if you're using unpaid media to amplify the message, and that is your story, then it is PR. As an example, an opinion piece, and you'll see it on the table here in the second column in yellow, has a little asterisk after it. An opinion piece is something that you inside your organisation would write, same as a report, same as a piece of content. But you would lean on a media or an external party or a journalist or an outlet to amplify that message. So when you pick up the Australian Financial Review or another large paper that may have an op-ed or an opinion piece, generally that is penned by the person or the organisation, but judged on its merit, that media outlet decides that it's worth publishing in its whole. This means that while you've created it, it does have greater credibility because it has been chosen on its merit to be published. In the case of AMGC, we spend a lot of time and amount of time and effort on working with media to convey the manufacturing message. We don't pay for the coverage that we generate. This is about telling the story of industry and exposing more people to why manufacturing is important. That said, we do invest some time in paid or owned media. And that can be in the form of the research reports that we've developed and then worked with a journalist or an outlet to convey the key messages of that piece of research. The final two on this list, internal communications and customer relations, are activities that require collaboration between all functions of the marketing team and the marketing mix, but also in some cases, your HR function or your management. But again, PR is interconnected and complementary to the other functions. So internal comms can be lent on by to deliver internal communications, PR can be lent on and sometimes very much leads. And similar with customer relations, you may need a PR response or you'll work with your team in how to manage difficult customers or standard responses. Advertising is about owned or paid media. You own the message, you own the asset, and you pay to place that out into the world. And it can take many different forms. Distinct to PR, you actually control the message. What you put on the paper is what ends up on the side of a bus or on a billboard or in the newspaper itself. You can also control the format, the timing, where it appears, when it appears, and how. Advertising tends to be a short-term focus. Its main aim is about immediate results. And as you can see from the little picture there, it's generally used to drive leads and drive awareness. It's targeted, so you can choose an industry publication, you can choose a broader geographical region, or you can go wide. But acquisition and retention are the two advertising drivers. And really advertising is used to keep that inquiry coming through to your business. In terms of the formats for advertising, and as I said, owned or paid, these are things like broadcast media, radio and TV, online media, websites, also print. You can use brochures, and business cards are also part of your advertising mix. At a trade show or anything else, when you hand your business card over, it needs to have some link back to your website, the uniform you might have on, and all of these other things. They all need to work and sing from the same song sheet. Billboards, outbound phone calls are also a form of advertising, as is direct mail and email, your presence at a trade show, any videos or training materials you produce, and advertorials. Advertorials are interesting because it is similar to an opinion piece, except you pay for that piece to be to appear in a publication. So it's a little bit different, but it is also one of the tools you can use. And of course, your social media presence. As I said before, the message, the timing, the audience, and the format is controlled by you at all times. However, because it is a paid medium, there is the school of thought that it carries a little bit less credibility than being in a media outlet or a journalistic story, because in that instance, somebody else is saying your message and it gives it more credibility. Underpinning both of your activities in PR and advertising is your brand. And sometimes brand, which is an owned property, you are in control of it, you own it. It does bind all of your activities, but sometimes people think that your brand is just your logo, and it's much more than that. It defines your business's identity through its name, its logo, the design, and it also includes the messaging. It could flow in as far as the values and also the consumer perception. It impacts all of these. Branding is very much a long-term investment. It helps your customers recognize your brand and your products, and it will help influence their feelings over time. In some cases, it can elicit an emotional connection. So an effective brand really does tie your customer and your audience to you and your business, but it also means to distinguish yourself from your competitors, and it gives people in some cases a badge of pride, because in some cases they may even want to wear it on a shirt or a hat, or happy to put a sticker up somewhere. So your brand is a really powerful thing, but it needs to be consistent. And as I mentioned earlier, everything from your business cards to your website to the logo on the side of the car or the sign out the front of the building, this identity needs to carry through everything you do. So what's in a brand? I'm going to throw up a logo in a second, which is very identifiable. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's the visual identity, and it has to be consistent, as I said. If your business and everything can be simplified into a single identifiable mark because of the nature of the products or the services you offer, great. And Twitter is a great example of what a brand represents, but also that it has become part of the vernacular in modern society. Sometimes your brand is also more valuable than you think. So when Twitter decided to rebrand, it was a very significant decision. And arguably, it's been discussed at many levels in many marketing and advertising publications, that it was probably a mistake. Because Twitter, prior to X, was well known. People would tweet. The logo represented tweeting in the form of a bird. And as I said, it became part of the modern day vernacular. The logo captured the brand promise, and it really captured everything about that platform. When they rebranded to X, it was an interesting and well-debated decision, but also a misstep. And there are analysts that believe that it was responsible for wiping $10 billion off the value of the company overnight. So your brand and any efforts to rebrand need to really be considered. And even today, X is still formerly known as Twitter when you hear about it on the news or in other media. Some people would say X now represents the owner's personality and his intent. Others would say they should have stayed with Twitter, but at the end of the day, you are the custodian of your brand, and it is a decision that you have to make. But you also need to consider the impacts of a rebrand and what it might mean for you long term. Similarly, the value of a brand. I'm about to bring up 3 brands that all share the same DNA. Under the skin, they are exactly the same product for the most part. But they all have a very different price point and a very different market. What you're essentially paying for between these 3 brands is a premium for the values, the brand, and some design elements. But the drivetrains, the platforms, and the technology that underpin them all come from the same shop. Volkswagen Group. Skoda, Volkswagen, and Audi. Skoda leans in on its brand promise of being simply clever. It emphasizes the practicality and the value that the brand offers, and it is the entry level point for the product offerings across the Volkswagen Group, at least here in Australia. Volkswagen is Das Auto, the car. It focuses on innovation and the joy of driving. Again, slightly more expensive than Skoda product, different proposition, but the two share a lot of stuff under the skin, if not arguably everything. And the premium brand Audi, Vorsprung durch Technik, advancement through technology. It highlights the sophistication and the performance of the brand, and also the design language and the materials and other features used give it that premium feel. But fundamentally, they all come from the same brand. That's right, from the same parent company. And the value in each of these three vehicles is in the brand, and that's what people arguably pay for. So if you're looking at your brand, is it a Twitter proposition where you've got a brand, you want to keep it, or you're looking to rebrand, or is it in the products and how do you maximize the value that you command for those? You should really start at the beginning, and this is where marketing and branding really starts to set the scene for the other functions. In the case of Qantas, the spirit of Australia, in the headlines a lot recently, arguably probably not holding up to the promise, but they do lean in on safety, quality of service, and a unique Australian experience. So the spirit of Australia works. Vegemite, the taste of Australia. No one would argue that Vegemite isn't Australian, and Australia isn't Vegemite in some ways, but it is an iconic product that divides some tastes and people's opinions, but it is absolutely the taste of Australia. And below are other examples. BlueScope Steel, creating strength. Cochlear, here, now, and always. It's a nice play on words, that one. It talks about their innovative spirit, but also that they're in Australia and have been here for some time. And ResMed, the CPAP and sleep technology provider, awaken your best. So if you had to summarize your business and your brand and your products into one key line, what would it be? And these are the things you need to start to consider. To get there, I think the best place is to take stock of where you currently are. And actually, taking a brand audit doesn't need to cost you a cent. You just need to set aside some time to gather all of your current assets, look at where they are, put them on a table. Do they have the same logo? Do they have the same language? Are the colors consistent? Are they up to date? Do all of the assets you have across your business mirror what is the most up-to-date thoughts on your brand? You should also look at things like your safety vests, your hard hats, on-site branding, pull-up banners, uniforms. These are all things that need to be considered as part of the branding mix. Then you should look deeper. What assets do you already have? And by assets, I mean, what photos have you got sitting in a drawer somewhere or on a hard drive somewhere from when the business was first set up? Have you got pictures of customers using your products and services? Are there things that you currently have in many, many different places that all form part of your company's history and story, which are gold when you're looking to tell a story about a business or a product to media, sitting unutilized? I did some work recently with a company that is almost 100 years old, and they do not have a single photo at hand prior to about the 1980s. These are the things that you should start to consider now before time gets away from you. And then once you've done all of that, where are the gaps? Your website, as an example, is your modern day shop front. Yet our research at AMGC shows that 40% of Australian manufacturers don't even have a website, and 60% of those websites, the companies that do, the website isn't even up to date. So really start to think about where the gaps are in what you're considering to do with your brand, but also what your customers and your BDMs and your sales channels might need. If you do have a website, when was the last time you looked at, say, your Google account? Have you Googled your business? Is the street address and the business hours and the phone numbers up to date? Have you encouraged any of your customers to leave a review against your business so that when people do look for you, they can see some, real life reviews on what it's like to work with you or your products? Have you looked at search engine optimization or keyword tagging? These are things that require expertise from an external party unless you've got it on in-house, but they're all quite important because at the end of the day, your website and your online presence is your modern day shop front. Have you also looked at what your competitors are doing? It's a really good thing to see what others out there are doing, whether they're local or international, and see where you stand in comparison to what they're doing. Is your site supported by a social media presence? And is it the right platform for your business as well? Are those media sites and social media sites up to date? So is your logo on your website the same as your LinkedIn? Does the description of the About Us on your website mirror that of what's on your LinkedIn page or other platforms? And then the final thing is, once you've been through all of that, if there are gaps, then look at people that can help you, whether it's in the PR space, the marketing space, or the advertising space. And in many cases, talking to a peer, a colleague, or even us will help you identify companies that aren't overly expensive, that understand the industry that you're working in, and may even understand the discipline that you're currently operating on and help you fill those gaps. But getting the basics right doesn't require a heap of effort. The first point about understanding what you will need to fill those gaps is, what are the objectives of the comms activity that you're undertaking? Is it to drive inquiry? Is it to raise the profile of the company? Is it to attract investors? These three examples aren't all, but they give you an understanding that each one requires a slightly different approach. Once you've done that, who's the audience? Are they internal? Do you need to talk to your staff, your board, shareholders? Is it external parties? Is it media, government, or investors? Or is it policy and decision makers? So government can be both an audience, but also an overarching target in anything that you do. And then you should prepare, clean house, make sure that your website and everything, including your social media and your fluoro vests and the signs on the side of the car, work vehicles are all the same. Have a look at which messages you've already got in the market and see if you can condense them. Really, it should be boiled down to 2 or 3 messages at best. If you want to, develop an engagement plan on how you're going to reach those audiences with your objectives. And then invest in some asset creation if you haven't before. And it's really important that you do. I'm a firm believer of, if you produce quality assets once, you can use them across so many different things. You don't have to have a bespoke solution for everything that you do. If you do it right once, you use it many, many times. And just be prepared to make your point and tell your story. I've worked with a few manufacturers in time that are like, yes, I've got a great story. I want to tell it. I want to go out to media. I want to do it. But at the last minute, when it's too late, we've already spoken to media, they get cold feet. And I think part of it is not fully understanding the impact and the pathway to getting their message out there. But they also get a little concerned that it might cost a lot of money. And that's not the case. So if you're going to jump in, make sure you're ready to. It's better to hold back and wait than jump in and then try and dive back out. In terms of asset creation, you need to treat your communications and marketing activity with the same care, as I said at the beginning, as if you're preparing for a potential client meeting. Because your potential clients that you haven't met with yet may read that article or see you on the web or see that social media post before they even consider you as a business. But that one little piece of communication may put you on their radar. I've chosen 2 images from companies that I've worked with. It's not to shame them. It's to demonstrate that with a small amount of effort and a little bit of change and a small amount of time and money, it can make a huge difference. So these 2 companies, one operates in the defense and missile space and rocketry, and the other one operates in the space and transport industry. They came to me and said, we really want to make some noise about this new technologies that we're developing and products we've got. I said, great. Can we spend a small amount of money? And I'm not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, modest small budget to help them put that best foot forward and make that first impression. So with a little bit of effort, they didn't purchase a Unimog on my recommendations. That was already happening. But the way they branded, the way they presented the photo, a proper photographer, uh, arguably gives a result that's 1,000 times better. And similarly below, you've got a storage tank for hydrogen that's going to be used in space in the first image, but it doesn't tell much of a story. In the second image, you've got the partners, you've got Lockheed Martin, you've got the company that's making the products and the people. And this is about telling the story. When you've got quality images, getting the media coverage is a whole lot easier. Never guaranteed, but it makes it a whole lot easier. Media are time constrained, resources constrained. So if you can make those little efforts early, it means better results for everybody at the end. I'd like to just step into 2 case studies now, just to give you an example of what could be possible with a little bit of effort. The first one is a company that AMGC worked with in its co-investment program called Harvest Bee. Harvest Bee's brief was to launch Australia's first textured protein facility and brand. There were a few misconceptions in the marketplace about textured proteins and alternative proteins. So not only were they launching a new facility, but they were going into a product space that had a few myths and misconceptions that needed to be addressed. They also had no assets, being a new business. So we invested some time and some money in developing some branding, some photography, and actually preparing a media event where we had both media and other partners at the event to kick things off. AMGC planned and delivered the media launch plan. We worked to invite the relevant ministers and media, and we developed a suite of assets to support the launch: photography, videography, media release, Q&A, and briefing documents. And if you want to, you can jump onto AMGC's media page to see what that looks like in our newsroom. All of the photography and the assets are there. The great thing about those assets were that Harvest Bee has gone on to use them across their website, their investor packs, pitches to potential clients. It wasn't just a one-shot wonder in terms of those assets. The results were over 150 pieces of coverage generated across all media outlets, print, TV, radio, and others. Some of them, and most of them, addressed the misconceptions around taste and texture, including The Australian, whose headline was "Australian plant-based meats pass the taste test." And the return on investment was 10 to 1. So for every $1 Harvest Bee put in, the return back to them was $10. And you'll see a little quote there from Christy Reardon, the co-founder of Harvest Bee. Doftech is another company that has worked with AMGC, and their case was a little different. They wanted an awareness piece that crossed into international press. Doftech is developing a system to help either the efficiency or the handling of vehicles, and their customers and their business will rely on overseas interest where vehicles are manufactured. They're the first to do what they've developed, and they needed assistance to get their message out on a very limited budget. To complicate matters, this was also done in the middle of the COVID lockdowns. So we were working across borders with a limited budget, with some quarantine rules in Victoria and other things that made it infinitely harder. So we developed a launch campaign that centered around a web briefing that incorporated a virtual walk around. We supplied and spent time developing all the support assets, including a comprehensive video, still imagery, media releases, and so forth. Similar to what we did for Harvest Bee, but with a slightly different brief in that we needed to get out into international press. The result was 1,500 pieces of international coverage. And again, we were at a period of time in the world where borders were locked down and people were stuck at home, so media were crying out for interesting stories. And that story went through Asia, Europe, and the US, hitting the brief of reaching OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers, and vehicle manufacturers. The coverage spurred direct requests from potential clients to Doftech within the first couple of weeks of it appearing around the world. Doftech can now say that they've signed up a few potential clients, and some of those initial inquiries have led to those customers coming on board. Again, for them, the return on investment was 30 to 1. So it shows that with small but targeted and concentrated investment into PR can garner direct results in terms of business opportunity and clients. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, what is news and how can I leverage this? The cartoon that I've known for a long time. So what is news? News is the relaying of new information from one person to another. And the last bit says it all. That's news. Well, no, it's not anymore. So if it's something that is outdated or old, or it's not timely, then it's much harder for it to result in some media coverage. But you can use it in other ways. So what makes a good media story? New products or services, introductions of new technology, statistics or records. You might have produced the millionth component or the half millionth or the thousandth, depending on the size of the products and the services you offer. You might have employed a new MD or a CEO or attracted some talent from a well-known company that's coming in to help you do things differently. It could be industry commentary, notable achievements, or milestones. But at the end of the day, a good news story has a couple of key elements. Timeliness, as in it's now and it's new and it's novel. Relevance, so is it solving an issue that's current, and net zero and climate change is one of those examples. Proximity is if it's Australian media love it. You've just got to find the right person to tell that story. In some cases, it's conflict. There could be tension and disagreement that drives interest. It could be a difference of opinion. It could be a human interest story. You've developed some medical technologies or a novel approach to an old problem. It could be very unique, and we've had plenty of those come through the AMGC program. It could be providing clarity or consciousness around another idea. And the other one is, over the fullness of time, your credibility. You might be a well-known and well-respected voice within the industry or in a particular topic. And if you put your hand up to talk to someone, of course, they'd want your opinion. We'll now quick shift to social media for a second, just to cover off some basics of what social media you should be leaning in on. Choosing the right social media platform, if at all, can be confusing. But my first piece of advice is don't try to be everything to everyone and don't try to cover all of them. You'll spend way too much time and effort in things that will not return a result to the business. So a quick rundown. Facebook is adults aged 25 to 54. Again, depending on what your products or services are, it may be a solution, but generally not. Instagram, if you're offering a consumer product that sits well in that platform, it could be fashion, could be food, could be other things. Of course, think of Instagram. But if you're a B2B business, probably not going to lean in on Instagram. X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Again, you can use that to get quick messages out or to respond to news or other things, but it's short text, tweets and hashtags. For the most part, probably not the top of the tree for me in the terms of industry. TikTok, not really, unless you've got ambassadors or other things that you're leaning in on and the services and the products that you provide are suited to that platform. Again, it's probably not something I put at the top of the list right now. LinkedIn is one of those key ones that I think is important for any manufacturing business to have, because it's also not just a way to get your message out. It can be a recruitment tool. It can be a support mechanism to your website, but it also allows you to engage with industry in different ways in sharing your thoughts, opinions, or bringing in more people to your network. Snapchat is one of those ones that I probably wouldn't bother with at the present, but YouTube has an important place. YouTube is a supporting and complementary platform. So if you're using videos or you want to get a how-to guide out to people, you want to host videos on your website, or you wish to use it in your social media, YouTube is an important one to consider. But each platform has its unique characteristics that cater to different types, content types and user types. I'd also like to suggest a key thing in anything that you do around social media, and that is that you pin your social media presence to an entity rather than a person. This means that you funnel all of the engagement around your business to one point, and that is the business. Pinning your social media efforts to a person, MD, CEO, that's fine. But it means if that MD or CEO or staff member was to leave at some point in the future, they take all their followers with them. So there's a few things to consider around that. I'll concentrate on LinkedIn because I think that's the most relevant for most people. The company page that you have needs to be the go-to source. Your staff or those that are active, that wish to be active, repost core company content from that page. All parties use agreed key phrases and tags, and I'll come to an example in a minute. This is to ensure that you channel all eyeballs towards the company. It maximizes your message distribution and it minimizes confusion. It drives engagement and it keeps followers pinned to your business, not a person. Again, if you're driving all of your followers to a person and that person decides to leave, you lose all of that engagement. So if we take this example of a post from AMGC, my decision-making process is identify the type of post it is. So do I want to own the message? And in this case, with the example on the left, I did. So it's a post. Do I want to support or amplify someone else's message? Then it would be a repost. And that could be a news outlet story. It could be a ministerial announcement. It could be a milestone from industry. I'll repost their post in that instance. Or are you seeking information from your audience? So that could be a poll or a request for comment. You should use hashtags to your advantage. So these are keywords that expand your message's reach. So if we use net zero as an example, hashtag net zero means that your message would be pushed out to anyone that is monitoring that particular hashtag. They may not be in your network at the moment, but if they see a post from you and it's interesting and engaging, they may then follow you. So you probably need to take the time to identify what key terms and phrases are relevant to your business and make sure that you try to integrate them into your posts wherever possible. And as said, it is a means to push your message out to others' feeds. So in the case of AMGC, if we had a take on a policy announcement or a piece of media, or we had a message we wanted to get out, I would use hashtag Ozpol, because Ozpol is Ozpolitics, and most media and business reporters follow hashtag Ozpol. And that means that the message that we have lands in their feed, even though they may not already follow us. Use ats, and I call them ats strategically, but this is a person or an entity. So you place the at symbol at the front, right in their name, it highlights in blue, and on the left you'll see Jens Goneman's name and Cameron England's name as examples of those. This means that your message is pushed directly to that person or that company. And again, take the time to identify those targets that you would like to reach. It could be a policy and decision maker, could be a government entity, could be a partner organization, could be a potential client. But at the end of the day, if you use them strategically, it means the message lands in their inbox. They may not follow you, but at least they've seen your message. But make sure you use them sparingly and keep it relevant and do not bombard them with that information. Use it sparingly. But remember that LinkedIn is a two-way platform, so respond if somebody asks a question. And make sure that your LinkedIn page is up to date. I know we've covered a lot of ground and I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So just quickly cover off some of the things that AMGC can help you with. PR and communication strategy, media relations and publicity, crisis and issues management, corporate and business profiling. These are the things that we can do. Media training is an important tenet of PR. If you're considering raising your profile and you're not sure where to begin and how to engage with media, we can help you understand that. We can also help you with digital and asset creation, research and industry analysis, government relations, events or product launches, and more. So with that, I think now I'll switch the presentation off and address any questions from the room. So has anybody got any questions that they would like to ask? If so, please put it in the chat column there. I'll just turn my screen sharing off. There we go. Okay, what happens when journalists move to different mastheads? That's a great question. Generally, PR is about a relationship with the journalist, but it can also be the masthead. Having those deep links with a journalist themselves would hopefully mean that whichever masthead they go to, they continue to use you as a trusted source of information. What if you were given advance notice of their move? You may ask them who would be replacing them. But it's definitely advisable to have at least one or two contacts at each masthead just to ensure that you have continuity. Also happens when they go on leave, they'll generally recommend a stand-in. So you start to also build those relationships with those. I hope that answers that question. What are the first steps to engage with AMGC as a manufacturer for PR support? I think that's from Matthew. Matthew, give me a call or send us an email. I'll put my details up at the end. What will also be happening post this is we'll send out a small feedback form. We'll be developing a bit of a 101 cheat sheet that'll give you, a condensed version of all of the information that was imparted there. At the bottom will be my contact details, and we can have a discussion about what your unique requirements are. See, someone is typing a question, so I'll just wait for that to come through. Bear with me for a moment. All right, I understand, Leonie, you may have posted a question. Could I just get you to post that again in the chat column, as I can't see it on my screen? Where would a manufacturer publicize to increase optimization or efficiency? So, Tim, it depends is the honest answer to that. You really need to understand what your aims are. If you're looking to build general awareness about the products or services you offer, and your target market is other manufacturers, then trade and industry press might be the most efficient pathway for you to do that. If it's a B to C, so business to consumer product, you might need to look at different ways to engage with that audience through either social media or other paid advertising. If it's a general message or you're doing something quite novel, then you want to get the message out more broadly, then PR is the pathway. But really, it is dependent on the circumstances that you're trying to, or the question you're trying to answer. Is it still worth building your personal brand on LinkedIn alongside your business, given posts from personal profiles seem to get much more engagement? Leonie, I've got your question now. So that's the whole person versus organization scenario. Yes is the short answer, because people are the experts and media will always want to talk to an expert. But you need to make sure that what you're saying as a person is complementary to the business, or the business is picking up something that you're saying. So in the instance of, let's say, an opinion piece or commentary around industry, AMGC will sometimes have that published by Jens Goneman, our managing director, but AMGC will then repost his thoughts on our business page. So they do have to work together. But the key thing is that the business page is always the business, not a person. So I have seen in some cases where a managing director or a C-suite has their profile as the business profile. And I think that's dangerous, and it's also a little bit confusing. So a business page needs to be run by somebody, but as the business page. And then your executive or your staff are bought into that page to share the message out. I hope that makes sense. But yes, it is still very worthwhile investing in your brand as a person, but making sure that it complements the business you're representing. There's a question here from Babette about AI. Look, is AI a game changer? AI is certainly a tool that we all need to become familiar with. I think AI again is reliant on the brief it is given. And so you still need to understand those questions and those core questions that I pose to you. Who are you trying to reach? What's your message? What does your brand stand for? Because AI can't answer those yet. There will still be very much a place for doing that first and very formative work, but then leaning in on tools like AI and experts to develop some of those assets. From myself, I use AI as a means to answer a broad question. I take what it says, and then I go off and do my own research to make sure that it's correct. It can be used to save time, but at the moment, I think we've still got to see how it works in the industry as a whole. The other thing is that in the world of PR, my experience is people need to understand the question, the answer, and know what they want from the beginning. But all too often, with these things, news cycles change, people change, circumstances change, so you need to be constantly evolving. So I don't think it's going to change immediately, but it will certainly be a complementary tool that we should definitely know about. Marie, do I have any suggestions for digital asset content libraries to organize and easily find? Marie, that's a great question. We've all got hard drives full of information, data, and other things. It's something that I'm guilty of too. Um, Personally, in AMGC, personally, I have a hard drive at home that has lots of files and folders, and it's done by year, but that's just for family photos and other things. Within the business, we use Microsoft Teams, and we have an agreed filing and folder system here. And you'll also see that on our news site, it's a searchable database built on the back of WordPress. So again, if it's for internal assets, I think there are a number of solutions out there, and I can come back to you offline if you like. But also, if it's a public facing platform, then it does need to be searchable, and you need to have that content available, particularly if you're undertaking some media and PR opportunities. I think we'll give it another minute or so for some questions, but I just want to thank you all for taking the time. I hope that you found this of value. It was a run through and we covered a lot of ground. But if you'd like to see some more things like this, please let us know. You will see a follow-up questionnaire from us. Please be as honest and frank as you would like. If you'd like us to dive into a bit more detail in different areas or hear from other people in the industry and how they're doing it, certainly something we'd like to consider if you believe you'd like to hear from them. But it doesn't appear to be any more questions at the moment. So I'll put my contact details and other things up on the screen. And please feel free to reach out and get in contact with us. And we look forward to chatting to you next time.